Today we're going to have some fun with looking at two opposing formations, the 1-4-3-3 that Brian will talk about, and then I selected the 1-4-1-4-1. And what I'd like to do is just explain to you a little bit about why I chose that. I'm actually not going to talk a lot about the opposing formation right now. I'm going to talk about how the 1-4-1-4-1 is something that how I would deploy it, how I would make it a system. And then after Brian's gone, I'll kind of come back to how I might use it against the 1-4-3-3, and also give a couple of examples of where I've actually used this in real life. A couple of things to consider. When I talk about the defending side briefly, I'm concerned with where my middle block and my low block is. When I get onto my attacking side of things, I'm thinking about my number 9 is a very important player. I'm thinking about the support the number 9 receives, and I'm also thinking about the ability to counter press. And then finally, the other thing I want to address briefly is the flexibility of this formation if you want to make the game perhaps a little bit more positive. So with that said, very much as it suggests, 1-4, this holding player, we'll call them number 6, the 1, an additional 4 midfielders, and then a number 9 up front by themselves. So again, the 1-4-1-4-1. This is a formation and system that I would deploy if I thought that the game result was going to be maybe 1-0. So if I figured that the likely outcome of this game was going to be 1-0, this might be a really good way to go. If I felt I was badly outmatched by an opponent, this is another formation and system I would use. And then I might use it at different times of the season based on availability of players, fatigue, etc. So from a defensive point of view, assuming that my opponent is somewhere in the final their back third, my final third, we're not going to look to press in this shape. We're going to let the opponent play in front of us, and we're going to give them that first third of the field. So if they want to play out the back, goalkeeper to centre backs, etc., and build, and we're going to drop off and form what I call a mid block. And you can see that this mid block currently, because the ball is central, is quite narrow. So there's channels here and there's channels here, and we're challenging the opponent to play around us, because playing through us, very challenging. Playing over us, assuming that our goalkeeper is engaged, makes it a little less high probability attacking for the opponent. So the middle block is designed to invite the opponent onto us, but then challenge them to see if they can find the wide space. So of course, if the ball shifts, it's really a lateral shift with all the players, kind of in a more of a zonal shape. The 6 is going to come across too, and the 9, they have a little bit of opportunity to do whatever they feel like is the best place to go. They might stay detached, they might come in and stay compact with us. The number 9 doesn't have a ton of defensive responsibility in my mid block, the way that I want to do it. Of course, if the opponent now sees they can't go through here or down here, they can't go through me because I'm compact and I'm shifted. They can't go over, or they might want to try to go over, but this long diagonal is a difficult ball to play, and it will give us some time to adjust. If they play long centrally or down the flank, hopefully my goalkeeper's engaged and some of my centre backs can win foot races. So very much my mid block. Now let's say for whatever reason the opponent's got some possession into the midfield. We're going to now come into our low block. It doesn't look a lot different than the mid block. I've got this screening number 6. My 4 midfielders have dropped down and in. And you can see that our lines are relatively flat. Our back 4 is relatively flat, but I've got this number 6 in this critical area where they might try to run players in. And then my number 9 will come down now, maybe to the top of the centre circle, maybe the halfway line centre spot. So now I'm in a nice compact low block. Again, very difficult to play through, almost impossible to play over because there's no space in behind now. And so what the opponent's probably going to try to do is move me left and right. So good discipline by my team in this low block, I feel pretty happy about my ability to defend. So again, defending, pretty standard. Obviously the qualities of the players, their defensive abilities, but it's the idea is that I can kind of stay in my zones. My 6 critical player, of course, protecting my 2 centre backs, maybe even having to drop in if one of my centre backs gets detached. So the 6 has to be an important player for us. But that's my kind of defensive thoughts about my 1-4-1-4-1, regardless of what the opponent's trying to do. So this is a formation and system where I'm saying to my players, this is what we do. We'll worry about what they do later. So there's my defending. Now, offensively, here's the key. As you can appreciate, if we're in this low block, we're miles away from the opposing goal. Even if we win the ball in the middle block, we've still got a way to go. So the first thing I'm thinking about is my number 9. What is the quality of my number 9? Is this a player that can hold the ball under pressure from opposing defenders and bring my players into the game? If that player can do that, I expect him or her to receive really good support from the corresponding midfielders, but I also expect my back line and my holding midfielder to get up there quickly too. So if my number 9 is inclined to hold the ball, we give him or her that task. It's a difficult task, so they probably have to be quite big, they have to be quite resilient, they have to be prepared to get kicked a bit, but then we demand that they get good support, but everybody comes. If we feel like we can't all go, then we're going to just kind of leave them out to dry. The other type of quality we might be looking is this person a speedster? Is this a person that even when we're kind of in a deeper defending position, if we win it and we can spray it, he or she can chase down a ball. They can win foot races. If they're that type of player, then obviously they're looking to play on the shoulder of the last defender and go all the time. So that's a different one, because now it's much harder to support the player that burns away. They still need support, but we have to think about how that number 9 is going to play for us. So I'm really curious in this 1-4-1-4-1 formation and system as to the quality of that number 9. That's key. That's going to determine how this becomes an offensive system. You'll notice here though that I talk about support. So where does support come from? Now support could be one of the central midfielders feeling good about being released because they have the holding central midfielder that could step up. So that could be really helpful to us. So that's a very obvious place for that support to my number 9 to come from, one of the 2 central midfielders. And they can kind of go with relative impunity. If they both go, we could have a challenge. So I'm thinking about, could one of those guys go? Both of my wide midfielders can go and try to catch up with the play because they have cover in the fullback positions. So I do feel like support is possible for the 9, depending on how we deploy the 9 and making sure that we're communicating the 7's gone, so 2's got to be prepared to cover. The 11's gone, so 3's got to be prepared to cover. The 10 or the 8 have gone, and of course the 6 has to be prepared to balance off. Now, again, we've talked about the 9, we've talked about the support. Now I'm thinking counter press. So if my 9 has got up here, he or she has held the ball, they've got a little bit of support coming, and we're kind of happy with that, but everybody else is hanging on the halfway line, then we have a very large gap. And the opponent, if they break into there, they've now basically cut our team in half. So this is where it is critical that offensively we stay pushing up the field together, even though we're in a relatively defensive kind of formation, but we're so high on the field that should we lose the ball, we've got enough players around to potentially win it back. So I'm not really looking to set up defensively in the opposing half or the final third at least. However, when I'm attacking and we turn the ball over, so now we're in transition, I'd be very happy if we can win it back there. So it's kind of a front foot, back foot type of mentality. Now, the last thing I want to address just before Brian comes up is if we just look at it one last time in this very, very setup, very clear setup, the 4 with the 1, the 4, the 1, the 4, the 1. Consider now, for whatever reason, you've fallen behind. This is not a great formation and system to chase the game. But think about how you could quickly morph this based on your personnel or based on the available players. Either you sub some in or these guys can do it. And you simply say, one of you go join the 9 and we go into a 4-4-2. So now we've got a kind of a different, we've got a couple of strikers, we've kind of morphed it there. Or we look at it and you say, okay, we're not gonna win the game in this formation and we're behind, or we're not gonna chase the game. So let's push the 11 and the 7 high and let's go into a 4-3-3. So what I like about this is that it doesn't take a lot of changing or shifting because your back 4 remains the same. You've got the 1, you've got this holding midfielder, so you can really change this in different ways. You could take another guy to go up help here. You could make the midfield narrower and just play with a winger that can go either side. That's not super common. More likely though, that you push 1 up to make it a 4-4-2, or you push 2 up to make it a 4-3-3. And I think out of this 1-4-1-4-1, you've got a lot of flexibility tactically. It appears more defensive. It appears perhaps, some might say negative, but if you're in tough competition and you really want to just eke out a close result for a number of reasons, because you think the opponent's superior, because you're fatigued, because you're missing some personnel, injuries have hit your squad, or maybe you don't have a lot of attacking personnel, I think you can win a lot of games like this that you weren't meant to. You're going to win them by 1 goal. I think you can draw a lot of games that you might have got exposed in. And I do think you have the ability, should you fall behind, that you can still be flexible and chase the game. So this is why I like this in the right circumstance. And I'm going to give you an example of a circumstance after Brian's talked to us a little bit about the 1-4-3-3. Thank you.
I'm Brian Turner, here talking about the 4-3-3 formation. As Ian Barker talked earlier, he is working in the 1-4-1-4-1, a little bit of a tongue twister there. And what I wanted to do is try to keep the continuity between the 5 basic formations, which is the 3-4-3, 4-4-2, 3-5-2, 4-5-1, and then what I'm working with, the 4-3-3. So a few things that I want to kind of keep at the forefront of our team's mind and how we train. In the attacking third, we're looking to keep our width and create overlaps, numerical advantages on the wide areas, getting those outside backs, ones that really like to get forward into the attack, that also like to defend, similar to a Trent Alexander-Arnold, if you will. In the middle third, we're going to be looking to play between the lines and really focus on the center mids. If you notice, kind of a theme with me is center mid dominance, as well as when we get kind of into the defensive third, staying compact and staying organized. Very generic, very top level, but at the end of the day in the defensive third, the only goal is to prevent the ball going in the back of the net. So I believe by our organization and us being able to be compact and stay disciplined, we'll be able to kind of do a good job of that. So now as I'm working in this 1-4-3-3, in each part of the field, we're going to kind of switch into a different formation of that 1-4-3-3, depending on, like I said, where we are in the field. So when we're looking in our defensive third, and typically we always start from the bottom, working our way up, but since Ian was starting down there as the home team, I'll take the away side for this one. So defensively, I'm having our 4-back, having a little depth with our center backs and our 2 and 3, having the 6 here, so kind of replicating a 4-1 as Ian started. But then what I want to do is have my 8 and 10 drop in below, my 9, 7, and 11, almost creating a 4-1-2-3 block. With that being said, we're keeping the organization of our back 4 here, knowing that our 6 is picking up any first man that's trying to penetrate our back line or make that run in. We're having our 8 and 10 then picking up on the next possible center mid that's getting into the attack. Let's say our 8 there, and our 7 and 11 are just watching those wide players, assisting our outside backs if the opposition's team outside mids or outside wingers try to get in there. And then we're kind of having our 9 up here. I don't like using the term island because that can be considered a little lonely, and being a former striker, it can be lonely there. But I'm just going to say staying at the point of our team, so that way we can look to get that ball out there and hold it up if need be, or if we can play a ball over, have that 9 into a one-on-one situation. So that's going to be when we are in our defensive third. As we move to the middle third, our formation is switching up just slightly, still based in that 1-4-3-3 formation, but now what we're doing is almost like a 2-3-4-1 formation. And we're having our 4 and 5 a little more. I keep scooting these guys up. We're having our 4 and 5 just a little more back, sitting behind the back line, starting to then introduce our outside backs, getting into the attack, kind of keeping in line with that 6, having a kind of almost a flat 4 there with our 8-10 wing players, and then still keeping that 9 up there just slightly above, so it's not so much being up there by themselves enough to change that formation a bit, but still staying in line there and connected with the rest of the team. So in our middle third, like I said, we will be in a 2-3-4-1 formation. And then as we move our way into the attacking third, now what we're going to do and how I like to play is having that our 2 center backs kind of going into a sweeper stopper formation, something that I still am holding on to quite a bit. Then we'll have our center back, we'll have our other center back in line with our 2 wing players. We'll have our 3 center mids here in this next block. Then we'll be followed by our 7, 11, and 9. If you notice, the 7 and 11 are a little more narrow in the attacking third. Obviously, we want that width to come then from these outside wing backs, and then we can have the 4 and 5. The 4 is that stopper, kind of shade to whichever side the ball is on, trying to prevent that counter, as well with that strong side center mid.
So now I'm just kind of thinking a little bit about what Brian might do with his chosen formation. So let's say goal kick, goalkeeper's got the ball, center of the field, 2 centre backs have gone wide for my opponent. Obviously the full backs are higher, the 6 is checking back, all of this kind of stuff. The first instruction, and this will be difficult with young players, but is don't chase, just stay compact. So as soon as the ball's in here, goal kick, or that we've knocked it long, they've established possession, this is our shape. Very narrow, our bank of 4, this key number 6 in the middle, and our number 9 just kind of floating around, maybe picking up an errant pass. We're going to completely give that area of the field. We're going to keep them in front of us, and we're going to say to them, get the ball up into here, and we'll just let them get the ball up into here. And now we want to be in a position to press the ball in this middle third. And so obviously we've got good numbers. We can release different players to press the ball, because every player in the midfield 4 here has a support player or a cover player. The 11 has a 3, the 8 and 10 have the 6, the 7 has a number 2. So at any point, somebody can step and press the ball. So I feel like we can press the ball if the ball gets into this. Now we're starting to get into the middle third, my middle block. The thing that I'm most concerned about is if the opponent can spray the ball out to this winger or this winger. And so the discipline is twofold. One, it's to stay compact and not chase. Once the ball gets in here, it's to be able to put effective pressure on the ball. And critically, when the ball gets played wide, as the ball is traveling, and this is key, as the ball is traveling, we should all be shifting and in preparation for that wide player receiving the ball. That is the key to this kind of thing. It requires 9 players, possibly 10, but 9 players moving together. If 9 move together, they're all moving similar distances and they're not going to get worn out. The challenge becomes as soon as one player, let's say this number 11, fails to work in unison with the rest, now we're exposed because the winger, my fullback, is exposed. This player's been lazy. Now everything goes to heck in a handbasket. So again, the key is discipline and structure. And then let's say, for example, they do get out wide. So now they've had success. The first thing we need to do is funnel back to the center of the field, basically using the tram lines of the center box, of the goal box. So everybody makes a recovery towards the center of the field, and we'll defend crosses, hopefully, if we've got good center backs, we'll defend crosses. And we've still got this number 9 up here as that outlet. And again, remember the questions about the number 9, the quality of the number 9 in terms of holding or being able to stretch the opponent, and then us getting up into support of that number 9.
Okay, so Ian just spoke about while his team was defending, I guess Wallace in the attacking third and middle third. He spoke about partially some of how I would attack out of here. I'm out of the defensive third, but we wanted to move now to the middle third of the field here. So you have me being in red, going down the field, Ian in yellow, going up the field. You can kind of see that formation in the 4-3-3. You can see how we're split up here in the 4-3-3 going against this 4-1-4-1 here. Now, when we have the ball, Ian brought up a good point, is how he has 2 blocks there that's very difficult for us to try to break in. And a formation like this, I think, is a very, very good one when you have that 1-goal lead, when you're trying to hold a 1-goal lead, if you know you're outnumbered in that way. So what I would like to do to try to break those lines and to try to move into the attack is really try to keep the ball wide here, trying to spread out his players as much as possible and create 2v2s out here in the wide areas, as well as 2v1s if, for example, one of them are late getting back, you catch him sleeping on the job, something in that manner. But what I want to do is try to keep that width here, so then that way within the middle of the field, I can try to work with my numbers here. And although we have a 3v3 here, I know that this 6 is not going to be able to stay on that 9 the entire time. And if my 9, and although it's a rare breed, is able to understand that and start to pull out and see just how far he can get that 6 out of position, now that's going to open up more space here in the middle of the field. Once again, if we can get the ball out here and create those wide advantages in the channels, then we are able to then get the ball up here on that width to try to come in. Something that Ian said was, now if we do, for example, if he, for example, gets beat out wide, their first instinct is to then drop to the center of the pitch and defend, almost park the bus, and not so much put the emphasis on those wide players or that advantage there. Now, although I know that the person closest to the ball isn't going to completely retreat in here, still knowing that they want to get back set before they try to put out the fire, if you will, is then now causing me telling my wide players, and as I mentioned earlier, getting those outside backs that have some speed and want to get into the attack. Go at them here, take these people on, and let's look to see if we can create those disadvantages here on the width. And as they're retreating, then what you see pretty famously in the past few years with Man City and Pep Guardiola is playing those early crosses in behind the back line as they're running towards their goal. One of the most dangerous things and nerve-wracking things as a center back is running towards your goal with the ball coming in. And we look for our nine as well as our outside mid to get in there, with our 10 possibly getting there supporting the attack. 8 and 6 are just coming in to make sure that to clean up any trash or anything that gets popped out wide. While defending here in the middle third, while I'm defending in this middle area here, I mentioned the formation that I want to switch into, which is having a 2-3-4-1 formation here. What I'm looking to do is keep the 7-11, obviously with our outside backs here. Our 4 and 5 are just a little more reserved. Our 6 will be picking up on that 9 as the 9 is coming into the middle third, going into our defensive third. We're having our center mids keep up, our 10 and 8 keep up with the opposition 10 and 8 there. And then our 7 and 11 are just watching that 2 and 3, just in case they want to get forward into the attack. Now, what we've seen and what's kind of been coached by Ian here is that they want to not necessarily look to go forward as much. It's more of a reserve formation. So I'm hoping, and so are my 7 and 11, are hoping that the 2 and 3 feel the same way and don't get too much into the attack. So that way they can focus their majority of their energy going into the attack and not so much defending there. We have our 9 on their opposition 6, really just trying to disrupt anything that gets into that 6. If they want to try to pivot or move it around, we want to just make sure we're disrupting, and then just knowing when to step to try to win that ball, when to just kind of let it stay in front of you and let the 4 and 5 have at it as they will.
Yeah, so just a thought. If this is how the opponent chose to take me on, and this number 6 is denied to me because the man marked, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to ask my 9 to get as high as possible, almost and possibly stand in an offside position. Obviously, they're not offsides until the ball is played to them. So the idea here would be to see if this number 9, because they don't have to be attached to my team defensively per se. So let's see if we can take and make this group walk about a little bit. If there's now a gap in here, could we fill it with one of our central midfielders? Could even one of our wide midfielders come across and maybe we tilt off to one side? So if we've got a special player that can invert and the fullback can adjust, that might be another way we would attack this. But as promised in my first bit, I'll just tell you briefly where this inspiration came from me. We were in Costa Rica with an Olympic Development U17 team from the Midwest, and we got in an exhibition game with the Costa Rican under-20 team trying to qualify for the World Cup. This was a friendly in advance of qualification. Most of their players were professionals. So the team I was coaching, I had them in a pretty standard 4-4-2 formation. And within 10 minutes of kickoff, we were 2-0 down. And so it was completely untenable because they were better man for man in every single position, with the possible exception of our number 9, who was quite special, played at Maryland, went and played in the MLS. So 2-0 down, and I couldn't see any way that we could win the game. The mismatch was too great. So the decision was to take off one of my strikers and go into the 1-4-1-4-1. And the idea was this: rather than put them back into a centre back, so I had 5, 4 and 1, which seems very defensive. The problem was that this space was very difficult for us. So we made an adjustment and we simply said one striker comes off and one holding midfielder comes in. And so we built an extra line into our team. At the end of 80 minutes, 90 minutes, it was 4-0. So we got beat 4-0. But my contention was, in that particular example, it could have been a lot more, possibly double. So it was not a formation I adjusted to try to win the game or get back into the game. It was to stem the bleeding. However, I do think that you could start this way with the intention of being conservative and then find ways to flex it based on how you release players. And I do like, and Brian addressed it, I do like the fact that my wide midfielders have support from or cover from wide defenders, and my 2 central midfielders have cover from basically 3 players. So the 9 doesn't always have to be isolated on that island.
Now, Ian, you mentioned that you started off in the 4-4-2 and then switched to the 1-4-1-4-1. At what point in the game did you do that, time-wise, score-wise, and just kind of, was it in the flow? Was it at halftime?
No. It's a in this particular example, we were 2-0 down after like 10. So there was no, and the mismatch was too great. It was a badly scheduled game. However, the job of the coach is to make that 80-90 minutes valuable for that particular group of players. So it was simply the withdrawal of a striker in the flow, the next throw-in, and I'd already prepped the central midfielder to go in and play where he would normally, because we play 4-4-2, he would normally just go in here. But I said to him, go in there and don't really move and sit. And it's funny that I'm kind of celebrating a 4-0 defeat, but that is part of the job sometimes. And I think perhaps if I'd started this way, in hindsight, we might have been able to keep them at 0-0 for an extended period of time and then cause frustration, maybe get them to change their game. But in this particular case, we had to adjust to them because they were so dominant.
Hey, some of my greatest coaching feats were 1-0, 2-0 losses where, as you said, it could have been so much more.
What I would say about this particular 1-4-1-4-1 formation, please don't be doing this with younger players. I think this is something where you're saying to your group of players who are mature enough to understand this is not kind of run around and have fun and let's score loads of goals. This is definitely a formation employed as a system for higher level competition where the balance for victory or defeat is really narrow. So a little scenario painting from a defensive point of view. So let's say that Brian's team, the red team, has penetrated my mid block. They've got into this wide attacking position. I'm going to assume that reasonably there'd be good support, attacking support here. Probably one of the attacking midfielders is going to come over and support. They got the 9 in the box. Maybe they're releasing another player in. So I've got some problems. Plus, they've got this wide player out here who's decided in this case to maintain their width. Huge problem, especially coaching young players, is if this player wants to be marking that player or is really overly concerned. Because if we think about it, here's the ball. So they need to know where they are. They need to be aware of blindside runs, but this person's not going to get the ball for quite some period of time. So they've got back into this wide position. I'm going to obviously get the fullback's got to come out, and the fullback's got to have the cover and support of the corresponding attack, a wide midfielder. So hopefully this looks a little bit like a 2v2. Now, there's got to be some degree of shift from my 2 centre-backs, which encourages a shift from my 3 on my left back, and he or she is looking across the line, and they hold our offside line. I want my 6 to try to stay between those 2 centre-backs. So my 6 is going to get drawn basically as these 2 move, the 6 moves. So we are going to be shifted and shunted to the right-hand side, all of us. This 11, my wide left, he or she can stay a bit wider because they can adjust to here and they can adjust to there. So it's not as connected. My 1, 2, 3, 4 there, those 4 are connected. My 6 is connected to these 2. These 2 are connected to this player. This one's a bit more freelance. And then finally, there's a couple of things I can do with my 9 because I don't want my 9 coming back in and disrupt. So my 9 could stay on the opposite side of the field with the idea that were we to win it, we've lost the attention of these 2 players and maybe now we can make blindside runs across them and behind them. So I quite like that idea. I quite like the idea of my forward staying mentally engaged. They're not being asked to physically engage, but mentally they're going actually away from the action with a view to then filling space late and getting out of the line of vision of the 2 opposing centre-backs. Alternatively, as we see that we're here, we could have them on this side, so we consider this our counter-press strong side, so that when we win it, we've got that outlet. The challenge I have there is that everything is in the field of vision of the opponent. So my general preference with my weak side player or my non-engaged offensive player is to go on the opposite side of the ball. Here, if they switch back across, we have to have immediate pressure. So if they kick back here and here, we can't let this person dictate. They can't run. So we don't want central midfielders when we're in this deep lying position to have space to run. That's devastating. So we've got to always be moving as the ball is moving. So if it goes 11 to 3 to 10, as that's moving, we're confronting. As it goes over here, we're confronting. If it goes back here, we all step up a little bit. If it goes from here all the way up there, as we discussed earlier, it's moving as the ball is traveling and then just adopting the same shape, but obviously on the other side of the field. So I think it can be done, but it requires everybody being on the same page. The challenge with this more zonal type defending is if you have an individual breakdown in discipline, not so much technique, but discipline, it's really problematic. So it's not man to man, it's much more of a zonal kind of concept.
Yeah, and Ian, and I think, you brought it up earlier, not being for the youth players, right? Because in the reality, unless you're in a professional environment, you're probably not working on a formation at training to sit back and hold the storm,
yeah,
right?
So if they've come from 9v9, I wouldn't be trying to do this in their first year of 11v11 at under 11, under 12. I wouldn't be trying to do that. So when I'm at those younger ages, I kind of like a 4-3-3 because it's a lot more individual matchups. Can you beat your opponent? So it becomes a little bit less team tactic or team strategy, individual. This is very much as we start to go into U13 or 13 and under, 14 and under, where we're actually getting to levels of competition where we expect them to be a little bit closer than normal.
Okay, so if we are in my team, the 4-3-3, if we've just moved past the middle third, we're moving into the attacking third. As we've gone over before, this formation in the 1-4-1-4-1 has those two blocks where as they move closer to goal, it's almost like concrete. It just hardens, and gets more compact and tight in there. So as we mentioned, wanting to get the ball out wide, trying to create some width and trying to pull their players and their wide players kind of out of the picture, knowing that, yes, in a perfect world, we have someone that can hit a ball from here to here. But if we're dealing with 14, 15, 16, 17-year-olds, right, the reality is even if they have the leg strength, the IQ, and all of that going into it, it's probably a little more difficult. So as we're trying to draw these players out here and create these 2v2 situations, we have our 10 a little higher up, kind of in this pocket right here, which is in between their back four and then their next middle four here. So in this 6 against the 6, we've now created almost a 1v1 scenario where we know if that 10 gets a little too high, they'll start getting support from the 4 or 5, depending on the side that they're on. So we want them kind of staying in this weird area, almost drawing the 6 out, as we said when we were in the middle third, seeing just how far we can get away with some gamesmanship here, getting the 6 drawn out of play there. Knowing that if we can get that 6 drawn out, we've created these 2v2s. As we get closer in here, we're hoping that we've been able to shake this last defender, and now we've gone into a 2v1 where maybe we're playing that ball in behind into one of our wide players. We also know that their 4 and 5 are going to be sitting, and we know the 6 is going to be staying somewhat neutrally or somewhat central, regardless of knowing how Ian is going about it, just because of the balance of the formation. So we're really trying to see if we can draw that 6 out, and now we have a 9 in 1v1 scenarios, whether it's against the 4, whether it's against the 5. Now we can say that these two might be a little closed in, but now what we're looking for that 9 to do is look to make those penetrating runs, breaking lines off back shoulder, off the inside shoulder, depending on where the ball is. If the ball moves over here more centrally to our center mid and we're able to pick up on it, Ian said that other center mids are going to be trying to deny us dribbling into that space, which is great because I'm not really looking for my 8 to do too much dribbling as is. But what we want to do is see if we can create some numerical disadvantages here in the center mid of the field. So if we know that their 4 block is here, we know that we have that 6 we have their 6 in this space. Now what we're going to be looking is for that 10 to see if they can get and receive the ball in this area between their 2 blocks. So then now once that ball gets played in here, now they have to react. And by the time they react and we receive that space in a 1v1 scenario, we're looking for that run here, for that run here, or even for that run in here. All of which are helping us create goal scoring chances. Now this is in a perfect world where we're hoping that the team is not as disciplined in that back 4, or for the fact that we have players that are able to, and I think a big part is going to be your outside backs and outside mids, how involved they're able to get into the attack, creating those advantages to unbalance the opposition. So then as they're retreating and moving back into space, we're able to exploit what we would like.